I stood at the back of the chapel, my hand trembling as I gripped my black purse. The scent of lilies filled the air, making me nauseous. Or maybe it wasn't the flowers. Maybe it was the voice I'd just heard from the powder room, drifting through the slightly open door. Finally. God, I thought this day would never come. I recognized that voice. Ashley Morrison, my husband's executive assistant, 28 years old, blonde, always wearing those tight pencil skirts to the office. I'd met her twice at company events. She'd smiled at me with 2 white teeth, called me Mrs. Patterson in that syrupy voice. Ashley, not here, another woman whispered. I didn't recognize that voice. Why not? He's dead, Megan. Dead. And you know what that means? Everything he promised me is finally mine. The condo in Miami, the investment accounts, all of it. I played the devoted assistant for 3 years, and now I'm getting paid. My vision blurred. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to breathe. David had been dead for 4 days. 4 days since the heart attack took him in his office. 4 days since I became a widow at 63 years old. And here was this girl, celebrating. I should have walked into that bathroom, should have confronted her. Instead, I did something that would change everything. I stayed silent. I turned around and walked back to the chapel, where my husband of 41 years lay in his casket. My name is Linda Patterson. I spent my entire career as a CPA, managing accounts, finding discrepancies, following money trails. I retired 2 years ago to spend more time with David. He was still working, still running his commercial real estate company in downtown Denver. Just a few more years? Lynn, he'd say. Then we'll travel. We'll do everything we planned. We never got those years. I sat in the front row between my daughter Claire and my son Marcus. They were holding my hands, thinking I needed support. They had no idea that my mind was racing, calculating, remembering. 3 months ago, I'd found a credit card statement that didn't belong to either of us. It had fallen out of David's briefcase. Before I could ask him about it, he'd snatched it away, said it was for business expenses, nothing for me to worry about. I'd believed him. Or maybe I'd wanted to believe him. 2 months ago, David started working late every Tuesday and Thursday. Big deal closing, he'd explained. I'd made him dinner on those nights anyway, left it in the fridge with notes. He'd come home after midnight, kiss my forehead, tell me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. Last month, he'd changed his phone password. When I asked why, he laughed it off. Security reasons, honey. You know how hackers are these days. I'd ignored all of it. 53 years of marriage teaches you to pick your battles, to trust, to not be that suspicious wife. But now, standing at his funeral, I realized I'd been blind. After the service, people filed past me, offering condolences. Ashley was in that line. She wore a black dress that hugged every curve, her eyes red-rimmed from what everyone must have thought was grief. When she reached me, she took my hands in hers. Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry for your loss. David was an incredible man. The best boss I ever had. Her voice cracked perfectly. If there's anything I can do, anything at all, please let me know. I looked into her eyes and smiled. Thank you, Ashley. That's very kind. She squeezed my hands and moved on. I watched her walk away, watched her glance at a younger woman near the door, the same woman from the bathroom. They exchanged a look, and in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I was going to do what I did best. I was going to follow the money. The week after the funeral was chaos. Lawyers, paperwork, well-meaning friends dropping off casseroles I'd never eat. But in between the chaos, I started my investigation. I found David's laptop in his home office. His password had always been our anniversary, but that didn't work anymore. I tried Ashley's birthday, which I'd found on the company website. Nothing. Then I tried something that made my stomach turn. Ashley's name combined with numbers. Ash 2896. It worked. What I found in his email made me physically ill. 3 years of correspondence. Plans for a condo in Miami. Promises of marriage once he handled things with me. Photos I couldn't bear to look at for more than a second. But I saved everything. I created a folder on a flash drive, backed it up to the cloud, printed key documents. The credit card statement I'd seen months ago was linked to an account I didn't know existed. David had been paying for Ashley's apartment, her car, her lifestyle. Over 3 years, he'd spent nearly $200,000 on her. But here's what Ashley didn't know. David had never changed his will. I found it in his file cabinet, dated 5 years ago, before Ashley ever entered the picture. Everything went to me. The house, the business, his retirement accounts, his life insurance, everything. I could have stopped there. Could have counted my blessings that at least I wasn't left with nothing. But then I found something else. An email from 2 weeks before David died. Ashley to David. When are you going to tell her? You promised me by the end of the year. I'm not waiting forever, David. I have options. His response. Soon, baby. I promise. Just need to restructure some assets first. Can't let her take half of everything I've built. I sat in his office chair, the leather still holding the shape of his body, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Rage. Pure, cold rage. David had been planning to leave me. After 41 years. After I'd put him through business school. After I'd raised our children while he built his empire. After I'd stood by him through every failure and success. He was going to leave me for a woman young enough to be his granddaughter. And Ashley thought she was going to cash in. I decided to let her think that. For now. The will reading was scheduled for 3 weeks after the funeral. I asked David's attorney, Robert Chen, if I could come to the office early, before anyone else arrived. Of course, Linda, Robert said over the phone. Is everything all right? I just have some questions. Personal ones. I'd rather discuss them privately. I arrived at Robert's office at 8 in the morning. He was a kind man in his 50s, someone David had trusted for years. I trusted him too, which is why I laid everything out on his conference table. The emails, the bank statements, the photos. Linda, he said quietly, his face pale. I had no idea. Neither did I said. But here's what I need to know. Is there any way Ashley Morrison could have a legal claim to David's estate? Robert studied the documents carefully. Did David have any other wills? Any documents you're not aware of? That's what I need you to find out. I need to know if he updated anything in the past 3 years. I need to know if he created any trusts, any accounts with her name on them. Can you do that? I can make inquiries. Linda, I have to ask, what are you planning to do with this information? I looked at him steadily. I'm planning to protect what's mine, and I'm planning to make sure that young woman understands that you don't destroy a 41-year marriage and walk away with a prize. Robert nodded slowly. Give me a week. I'll find out everything. During that week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to a salon. Not my regular place where I got my gray hair trimmed every 6 weeks. I went to a high-end salon in Cherry Creek, the kind of place where women like Ashley probably spent their Saturdays. I want something different, I told the stylist, a young woman with pink highlights. Something that makes me look like I'm starting over. She studied my face, my boring gray bob, and smiled. I know exactly what you need. 3 hours later, I walked out with shoulder-length layers, soft honey blonde highlights that made my blue eyes pop, and a confidence I hadn't felt in years. I bought new clothes too, not my usual elastic waist pants and cardigan sets. A tailored navy dress, a cream silk blouse, black pants that actually fit. When I looked in the mirror that night, I saw a different woman. Not the frumpy widow everyone expected. Someone stronger. Someone who wasn't going to disappear quietly. Robert called me 6 days later. Linda, you need to come to the office. I found something. My heart pounded as I drove downtown. Robert's face was grim when I arrived. 3 months ago, David opened a new brokerage account. He transferred $500,000 into it. My breath caught. Is Ashley's name on it? No. But he named her as beneficiary on death. If you hadn't asked me to investigate, this account would have transferred to her automatically, outside of probate. No one would have known. $500,000. Money he'd taken from our joint accounts, money I'd helped earn, money that was supposed to be our retirement. Can we stop it? I asked. Robert leaned back in his chair. David's will supersedes the beneficiary designation because the money was marital property. You have legal grounds to claim it. But there's something else you should know. I did some digging into Miss Morrison's background. She's done this before. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were news clippings, court records. Ashley Morrison had been involved with 2 other older, married men in the past 5 years. Both relationships ended when the men died, one from a heart attack, one from a stroke. In both cases, there were beneficiary disputes. In both cases, Ashley had settled out of court for undisclosed amounts. "My God," I whispered. "I think you should keep this information safe," Robert said carefully. "And I think you should attend the will reading ready for anything." The day of the will reading, I arrived last. Ashley was already there, sitting across from Claire and Marcus, wearing a black dress with a strand of pearls. My children looked confused about why David's assistant was present. "Mrs. Patterson." Ashley stood when I entered, that fake sympathy on her face again. "I hope you don't mind that I'm here." Robert said David had left me something, a small token of appreciation for my years of service. "Of course," I said smoothly, sitting down. I'd worn my navy dress, my new hairstyle, subtle makeup. I saw Ashley's eyes widen slightly, saw her assess this new version of me. Robert cleared his throat and began reading the will. Everything to me, as expected. The house, the business, the retirement accounts, the life insurance. Ashley's face grew tighter with each sentence. "However," Robert continued, "there is the matter of a brokerage account opened 3 months ago." He looked at me. "Linda, as David's widow and as the account was funded with marital assets, you are the legal owner of these funds." "I don't understand," Ashley said, her voice sharp now, the sweet assistant act dropping. "David told me." She stopped herself. "What did David tell you?" I asked quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. This was the moment. I could have stayed silent, could have let her walk away with nothing and count it as a win. But I thought about that conversation in the bathroom. Finally. God, I thought this day would never come. "What did my husband tell you, Ashley?" I repeated, my voice stronger now. Her face flushed. "Nothing. I just meant, he mentioned he appreciated my work, that's all." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "Is that all?" "Because I have emails here that suggest something quite different. Emails where David promised you that brokerage account. Emails where you two discussed your future together. Emails where you called yourself his soulmate and called me, and I quote, the obstacle." The room went silent. Claire gasped. Marcus leaned forward, his face darkening. "Mom?" Claire whispered. "Your father was having an affair," I said, my voice steady despite the way my hands shook. "For 3 years, with Miss Morrison here. He was planning to leave me, to divorce me and marry her. He'd promised her money, a condo in Miami, a new life. What he didn't tell her was that he'd never actually changed his will, that everything would still come to me." Ashley stood up abruptly. "You don't know what you're talking about. David and I, we were in love. He was going to marry me. He promised a lot of things," I said. "To you, to me, to our children. But promises don't change legal documents, Ashley. And they don't change the fact that the money you thought was yours was never his to give away. It was ours, mine and David's, built over 41 years of marriage." "This is insane," Ashley said, looking at Robert. "Can she do this? Can she just take what's rightfully mine?" "Nothing is rightfully yours, Miss Morrison," Robert said firmly. "The brokerage account was funded with marital assets. Mrs. Patterson has every legal right to claim it." Ashley's face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? You think you can just erase me? I loved David. I made him happy in ways you never could. He was going to leave you, but he didn't," I said quietly. "He died first. And now you're left with nothing but the knowledge that you wasted 3 years of your life on a married man's empty promises." She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, then turned back. "I could sue. I could tell everyone what kind of man David really was. Ruin his reputation. Go ahead," I said. "Tell everyone. Because I have something else you don't know about." I pulled out another document. 2 weeks ago, I hired a private investigator. Very thorough woman. She found out about your 2 previous relationships, both with older, wealthy, married men. Both men died suddenly. Both times you claimed beneficiary rights. Tell me, Ashley, did you love them too? Or is this just what you do? All the color drained from her face. I could go to the police, I continued, my voice cold now. I could suggest they investigate David's death more thoroughly. Heart attack at 54, sudden and unexpected. I could mention that you were alone with him in his office that day, that you called 911. I could let them know about your pattern, your history. You're crazy, she whispered, but her voice shook. Maybe. Or maybe I'm a widow who's had enough. Here's what's going to happen, Ashley. You're going to leave this office and never contact my family again. You're going to resign from David's company, effective immediately. And you're going to disappear from our lives, because if you don't, if you try to sue or cause any trouble, I will make it my life's mission to expose exactly what you are. I'll hire the best investigators money can buy. I'll contact the families of those other men. I'll make sure everyone knows your name and your face and what you do to vulnerable, foolish men. She stared at me. This woman who thought she'd won, who thought my husband's death was her payday. Then she turned and walked out without another word. After she left, Claire came to me, tears streaming down her face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Marcus was angrier. How could Dad do this? How could he? Your father was a complicated man, I said, suddenly exhausted. He loved you both. I believe he loved me too, once. But somewhere along the way, he got lost. He made terrible choices, and now we have to figure out how to move forward. Robert closed his briefcase. Linda, I need to ask, what you said about the investigator, about going to the police, were you serious? I met his eyes. I was serious about protecting my family and my future. Whether I actually do any of those things depends on whether Miss Morrison stays away. He nodded slowly. You've become someone David wouldn't have recognized. Good, I said, because the woman David knew wouldn't have survived this. In the weeks that followed, I did something I never thought I'd do. I took over David's company. Marcus wanted to sell it, said it would be too painful for me to run a place where Dad had betrayed me, but I disagreed. This company isn't about your father anymore, I told him. It's about the 15 employees who depend on it for their livelihood. It's about the clients who trusted us. And it's about proving that I'm more than just David's widow. I hired a new executive assistant, a competent woman in her 50s named Patricia. I restructured the business, brought in new clients, implemented systems I'd been suggesting to David for years that he'd always dismissed. Within 3 months, revenue was up 20%. The $500,000 from the brokerage account? I didn't keep it. Instead, I established a foundation to help women over 50 who were going through divorce or widowhood. Women who'd spent their lives supporting their husbands' dreams and suddenly found themselves alone and unprepared. I called it the Second Chapter Foundation. Claire helped me set it up. Mom, this is incredible. You're turning something so painful into something that helps people. That's what we do, I told her. We survive, and then we help others survive too. 6 months after David's funeral, I attended a fundraiser for the foundation. I wore a red dress, the kind David would have said was too young for me, too bold. I wore my hair down, my honey blonde highlights catching the light. I stood on stage and told my story, not all of it, but enough. Enough about betrayal, about finding strength, about rebuilding. After my speech, women came up to me in tears, telling me their own stories. 53 years old, husband left her for his yoga instructor. 61, discovered her husband had a second family. 66, found out her husband had gambled away their retirement. I listened to every single one. I gave them the foundation's information. I told them what I'd learned. That grief and rage could coexist. That you could love someone and hate what they did. That starting over at 63 was possible. One woman, probably in her early 50s, took my hand. How did you find the strength? How did you go from widow to this? She gestured at the foundation's banner, at the room full of people. I thought about that moment in the chapel, hearing Ashley's voice. I thought about the choice I'd made to stay silent, to investigate, to fight smart, instead of just fighting hard. I stopped being the person everyone expected me to be, I said. The quiet wife, the devoted widow, the woman who'd just accept what happened and fade away. I decided that if David was going to rewrite our history, I was going to write my own ending. Later that night, Alone in the house that was now just mine, I sat in David's old office. I'd redecorated it, turned it into my own workspace. His leather chair was gone, replaced with something more comfortable. His golf trophies were packed away. On the wall hung a photo of Claire and Marcus as children, one of my parents on their 50th anniversary, and one of me receiving an award for the foundation. No photos of David. Not anymore. People asked me if I missed him. The honest answer was complicated. I missed who I thought he was. I missed the marriage I thought we had, but I didn't miss the reality of those last 3 years. The lies, the slow erosion of respect. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd never overheard Ashley in that bathroom. Would I have spent the rest of my life believing David had been faithful? Would that have been better? No, I decided. The truth, as painful as it was, had given me something unexpected. It had given me my life back, not the life I'd planned, not the retirement of travel and companionship I'd dreamed of, but a life that was fully, completely mine. I ran a successful business. I had founded an organization that helped hundreds of women every year. I had relationships with my children that were deeper and more honest than before. I had friends who saw me as Linda, not just David's wife, and I had something else. I had the knowledge that when everything fell apart, when I could have become bitter and small and broken, I chose differently. I chose to use my skills, my intelligence, my rage, and turn them into something constructive. Ashley Morrison? I heard through the grapevine that she'd left Denver, moved to Phoenix or Scottsdale. I didn't care enough to verify. She'd lost, not because I'd taken money from her, but because she'd bet on a dead man's promises and learned too late that promises from men who cheat on their wives aren't worth the breath they're spoken with. As for David, I made peace with his memory. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. He was human, flawed, selfish. He'd loved us in his way, but that way wasn't enough, and that was okay. Because I didn't need his love anymore, I had something better. I had my own. On the 1-year anniversary of David's death, I didn't visit his grave. Instead, I stood in front of a room of women at a Second Chapter Foundation workshop. They ranged in age from 42 to 73. Each had a story of betrayal, of loss, of having to rebuild. The world tells us that women of a certain age should fade into the background, I said, that our best years are behind us, that we should be grateful for whatever scraps of life remain. But I'm here to tell you something different. Your next chapter can be your best chapter. Not because you'll forget what happened, not because the pain will disappear, but because you'll know something you didn't know before. You'll know exactly what you're capable of surviving. And survival, my friends, is just the beginning. I looked at their faces, saw the same mixture of grief and determination I'd felt in that chapel. And I smiled. Not the fake smile I'd given Ashley at the funeral, but a real one. The smile of someone who'd walked through fire and come out forged into something stronger. So, let me ask you something, I said. When someone tries to write you off, to count you out, to take what's yours, what are you going to do? A woman in the back, maybe 60 years old, raised her hand. Fight back. Louder, I said. Fight back. More voices joined. I can't hear you. Fight back! The room erupted, women standing, clapping, some crying, some laughing. And in that moment, standing in front of these women who'd lost so much but refused to lose themselves, I finally understood what David had taken from me and what he'd inadvertently given me. He'd taken my illusions, my comfortable life, my faith in forever, but he'd given me something more valuable. He'd given me a reason to become someone new, someone who couldn't be broken by betrayal, someone who turned pain into purpose. I was 64 years old. I ran a successful company. I'd helped hundreds of women restart their lives. I had a foundation that would outlive me, helping women for generations. And it all started with a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, and a decision to stay silent until I was ready to roar. That's the thing about betrayal. It can destroy you, or it can reveal who you really are underneath all the roles you've played. Wife, mother, supporter, believer. Underneath all of that, I was always a fighter. I just needed someone to betray me badly enough to remember.